Today on Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
How can we stack the deck in our favor so that we can help ourselves help ourselves? Because life is already hard enough. So let's stack the deck in our favor and use things to our advantage versus having them negatively affect us.
A third of the people love you, a third don't care about you, and a third hate you. So you concentrate on the third that love you and you go for it.
I think the greatest Achilles heel for leaders is they don't give themselves time to think.
So my journey is one of those, there are a lot of detours. There's a lot of going off on the side roads.
Thrive Out listeners, you're in for a treat. We're here with Jamal Mashburn,
Jesse Itzler,
the John Maxwell,
Jackie the Joke Man Martling, New York Rangers great Mike Richter,
Lisa Lampanelli,
Mary Carrillo.
Oh, how nice.
I'm actually going through the practice of being an entrepreneur.
Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and thrive loud.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
I love it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a former professional golfer turned writer, podcaster, and entrepreneur. That is definitely a first for the show. After years on multiple golf tours around the world, he's now taking the professional athlete's mindset to everyday people in everyday life. He is the author of the book From Here to There, the host of the Up and Comers show, and I am sure that today we will connect, collaborate, and inspire. I have a feeling we're really going to like this conversation here. Me personally, Thrive Loud listeners, Thane Marcus Ringler. Thane, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Lou. It's going to be fun to chat a little bit today. And I think you're a master of intros. I must say, well done.
Well, why, thank you. A lot of people have said, I just want to go on Lou's show just so he can do some kind of introduction for me. Can I follow him around wherever I go, before I speak, before I talk, whatever it might be? And I said, we could work out a price. We could see.
Yeah. No, you have a new budding business there. I definitely think you're onto something.
So Thane Marcus Ringler joined us from Los Angeles, California, where it's not actually sunny today, but that we'll just say that at the time you're listening to this, odds are it probably will be.
Yes.
And as I read in the intro, you've had an interesting story, and I want you to share with the listeners. Let's go through the journey a little bit. Talk about how it went from being a pro to this focus and stepping out of it after a few years on the tour. And I think our listeners would love to hear that transition. If it's okay with you, share away.
Yeah, no, it's a big transition. I mean, to be honest, my whole life was with that goal, was to be a successful professional golfer. I played golf for over 20 years and got to play for about 3.5 years as a professional and compete on different tours, like you mentioned. And really, the average time it takes for guys to get the PGA Tour, this might be surprising to a lot of people, but that average time is 7 to 10 years. So the majority of guys that you're seeing on the big screen on the PGA Tour have been grinding for years and years and years to get to where they are. So I was in the middle of that process and was starting to get a little momentum on my side when I was actually struck with I had a back injury pop up. A muscle strain in my back that ended up really throwing some massive curveballs into the second half of my career. The last year and a half I competed, it repeated about 5 different times over that year and a half. And it really left me in a place of uncertainty and dealing with a lot of frustrations and difficulties and really trying to figure out what I was going to do because I was fully committed, fully sold out to what I was trying to accomplish with golf. And through that process, through those years of struggling with the injury, God kind of redirected some of my passions in my heart. And I ended up starting a couple things, like you mentioned, the podcast that started about 2.5 years ago with my friend Adam from college. And we're not quite the depth that you are, but we hit at the 80 episode mark. So that was been a really fun project. And that's taught me so much. But alongside that, I really had this idea of how could I repay my investors and sponsors that backed my professional golf journey? How could I repay them if I couldn't return that financial investment back to them? And that's where the initial idea for the book came from. It was, man, if I could write a book about what this journey of playing professional golf has taught me about life and give that to them, man, that'd be such a sweet, fulfilling accomplishment for me personally. And that kind of started me on that journey of figuring out what it was I was trying to write and what it looked like to actually go from idea to reality, which was an 18-month process that kind of landed in November when it released. And it's been a really fun journey the last year and a half of really building into all these new career endeavors that current life is characterized by.
Okay, so I want to go into something that I'm very interested in, and this is something that I think is really a key part of something that you will be able to provide really good wording around, but also an interesting thought process. And that is the game of golf has, and at the level that you've played it, forget about how great the level of skill. If you and I went out on the course, which is not that much difficult to be that much better than me, but I imagine like I would look and you say, this guy's just unbelievable. It's amazing when you start to realize how difficult it is to succeed at that level. And the real thing is that what happens between your ears is where the game is won, and how you handle this and the mindset and all of that. I guess the challenge is how the professional life at that level, the mindset is so key and so important. And in fact, too often you hear that that's where the things crumble and go apart, but the mental strength that you have is so much stronger than most people. So I guess this is part of your magic. And that is, what have you done specifically for you when you've recognized what is that athlete's mindset? How do you process as it plays to golf? What practices do you deploy, and what exactly are you teaching? Because that I want to hear about, because I think that would be awesome to learn about.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think all sports are a great arena for personal development, but I would say golf is chief among them because, as you mentioned, it is 90+% in your mind, especially after you get a baseline of like body competency and muscle memory formed. Then it just really becomes a mental game, of a game against yourself and how you can maximize your ability every time, regardless of the circumstances or the situations or the pressures, and generate confidence even when you don't necessarily have any reason to. And so you are 100% right in that sense. And it's a game of inches. I mean, the difference between making it and not making it, being successful and not, winning and losing, is so small. It's neurotically small. It's just brutal. So for me, it really, you learn the most by failure. I think that's true for all of us. And so golf gives you immediate feedback every single shot of whether you set out to accomplish what you wanted to. Now, having the perfect shot in your mind and executing it really never happens. So there has to be some grace there, but it gives you such immediate feedback. And you're able to see how much influence your mind has. And that's really what the journey I was on in professional golf was, understanding the mindset, understanding the habits and routines that would lead to my most consistent and best results. And kind of diving into the process of how to discover that. And through those years of, and there's a lot of different strategies we can talk about, but through those years of kind of developing those tools and practices, when I was transitioning out of golf, one of the things was, man, what am I equipped, called, and created to do in life, and how can I provide value to others? And that's where this development and performance coaching came in. I targeted 4 to 5 different friends who were freelancers or entrepreneurs or people that could benefit from something like this to test it on. And I also had a brother-in-law who's an executive coach here in LA. And so I had a lot of great feedback and resources, and was able to test the waters and see that there really is value here, that people really do need help, and that I can really provide help for them and be their teammate in that process. So the last year has been really developing that practice. And it's something that is so fulfilling for me now, because in golf, that all of it was focused on myself. Right? It was all on me and my performance. And doing all things centered around you really is not fulfilling. It really is life-sucking in a lot of ways, because the world does not revolve around us. And so knowing that we're just a small piece of the puzzle of humanity, and now being able to take those tools and those strategies and applying them to others and giving them to others has been such a gift to me, and is way more fulfilling. And so it's been kind of fun to see that go full circle.
Thane, I want to ask this question as in looking at people who don't necessarily have the athlete's mindset, your everyday people in everyday life. What is the most unique thing that they learn about your approach? What is that one thing? If there's one thing more than not that you help to coach and teach that stands out more for them, that might be the most surprising or the most different from the way they normally think?
Yeah, several things come to mind. It's hard to pinpoint the number one thing, I would say. But the several things that come to mind, one of them that comes to mind is self-awareness. Mm-hmm. The process of developing self-awareness is something that doesn't happen by chance. It must take intention, and it must take effort over time. And so one of the things I love helping people do is, look, like my goal is always to work myself out of a job. Like, I want to have them be empowered to do a lot of this accountability and objectivity by themselves. And that process of self-awareness is a threefold one that I like to think about. It's, in one sense, you can call it retroactively, actively, and proactively. Another way to say it is discovering, understanding, and then optimizing. And so really you're looking in the past, you're discovering, you're retroactively looking at the decisions you made and the actions you took and why you did it. So you can learn how the subconscious is running, because the subconscious runs 95% of our actions, and largely our conscious then makes up narratives around why we did it. And so if we can better understand our subconscious and why we're actually taking the actions that we do, then we can better inform the subconscious and produce the results and the actions that we truly want. And so retroactively is looking back, it's reflecting, it's journaling, it's evaluating, it's kind of uncovering the layers of it. Understanding, which is more the active look, is seeing it happen in the moment, being aware in the situations that you're in to see, like, oh man, I just did this decision, or I just took this action and this is why, and seeing it match up in real time. So you get that lived experience. And then the optimizing, or the proactively learning about yourself is really from that familiarity of discovering, understanding. Then you start looking in the future and seeing situations before they arise, and you're able to prime yourself for that, so that you can provide your best either decision, conversation, or action, similar to this podcast, right? Like we talked about before. I've got a cup of water, I've got a cup of sparkling water, and I've got a cup of coffee. And it's like, those are just small things, but it's priming me for a good conversation, and how can we stack the deck in our favor so that we can help ourselves help ourselves? Because life is already hard enough. So let's stack the deck in our favor and use things to our advantage versus having them negatively affect us.
I like it. I was going to ask this question, but I got shifted there because, I want to talk a little bit about being the podcast host. And this is really interesting because versus coaching, and coaching is great listening. And podcasting really offers the host an opportunity to really hear some amazing stories. How has hosting your podcast show helped develop you as a leader and all the other skills that you help out with, your coaching, your speaking, all of that?
It's hard to even say how much it's helped me. I mean, honestly, it's been one of the best gifts and best blessings in my life, because like you said, coaching is all about listening. And I guarantee you, I would not be half the listener I am today if it weren't for the podcast. Interviewing people, a good interview is a dance, right? And you need to have a framework that you're coming into with, but you also need to be very present and engaging with the information the person is saying, so that you can make it flow well. That's what a good conversation interview is. It has a flow to it. It's natural because you're actually listening to what they're saying and engaging with it. And so I think podcasting has benefited me so much as a listener. It's helped me so much as a thinker. It just helps you think through things better, because you have to make comment and engage with ideas and concepts and different views. So I think those are two of the biggest gifts. And then also it makes you a better communicator, obviously. So I do most of the editing as well for a while. And so you get to really hear yourself talk over and over again, and you start understanding your verbal tics and different fillers and things that you don't appreciate about your own communication skills. And so you get to refine that too. So, I mean, from top to bottom, it has just been such a gift. And I'm just grateful for the platform that it is. It's been a really cool outlet.
I'm just laughing to the point that you just made because my wife has often told me that I love to hear the sound of my own voice. And I tell her, I go, no, I'm actually sick of it because specifically I have a team of people and during the holidays, a lot of them are on vacation and we had a bunch of shows running. So I go back into the weeds and start helping to do some editing during that window. I'm like, oh my God, I can't hear myself anymore. But it's brutal. It's brutal. You do become conscious. I realized that one of the things that's interesting is when I just came from a conference where I was speaking and I was very conscious of my beats, so to speak, and my pauses. And I don't necessarily do that as much on the show because I do talk very quickly. And when I do speak, I'm trying to compact it. So it is a complete dichotomy of the way that I actually present versus the way that I actually am on the podcast show. It is one of the funnier things. But I've noticed, first of all, you have a great sounding voice. And I do realize you also came from a place where, you know, when you were competing, no one was allowed to talk.
Yes.
Most you heard was silence, about to hit the swing, which now brings something I want to go back to. And this is, do you miss the competitive golf?
I definitely do. I mean, I was always a competitor. I was much more a competitor than I was a golfer. So I love the game of golf, but what I love more is competing. And so I've never been necessarily a golf fanatic, but I definitely miss, you know, this last year I played the least amount of golf that I ever have in my life just because I'm building everything that I'm doing now and it just takes a lot of time and it just wasn't a priority. So I definitely miss being on the golf course more consistently. And I do miss the thrill of competing. You know, it's the thing that I loved about professional golf so much was, and still to this day is that it's the hardest thing I can imagine doing. And that challenge, that personal challenge of something that seems almost impossible and insurmountable is such a stimulating, inspiring, thrilling pursuit that I do miss some of, but you know, I get to take that same approach to what I do now. And it is still stimulating, inspiring. It's just a different taste of that, I guess. But there are, especially when big tournaments are on, those are the days I really miss it.
So I want to go down this avenue, if you allow me to, Thane, and that is faith seems to have a big role in your life. Can you share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Definitely. No, I'd love to. I mean, this is probably the biggest part of my life, to be honest. I grew up in the church and my parents were Christians and I accepted and joined the faith at a young age, but it wasn't really until later in my college years that it became personal and real for me. But the last, 6 or 7 years, it's been a really amazing experience to just grow in that faith. And the testimony that I have is just that God has really changed me. He's really changed my heart, my life, and made me love Him and love others better. And that's the testimony that I have by reading His Word, the Bible, and by being a part of community and the church and the local body of Christ, and those things that He prescribes in the Bible. I've just really experienced such amazing fruit and fulfillment and blessing from it that I can't help but believe it to be true. And so it really does shape everything I do. And Romans 11:36 is a big life verse for me. It's for from Him and through Him and to Him are all things. And it really is all encompassing. And so every day I start and end my day by reading the Bible, God's Word. And I start my day on my knees in prayer, submitting to Him. And I really want everything I do to be in alignment with Him. That's my true north, my aligning point, that I really evaluate all the things that I'm doing. And so it's been a huge part of my life, and it will always be. And I'm so grateful. And so the thing I always love to encourage people listening is, regardless of what you believe, I do strongly recommend everyone reading the Bible at least once in their life. It's one of the greatest historical documents there are today. It's an amazing book. And I really do believe it to be true. And that's up to you to make that decision. But for me, it has changed my life.
So it's interesting, Thane. I normally ask the guests at this part of the program, when you have trouble thriving, what person or practice do you seek to help yourself get back on the thriving track? So I'm going to take a step and say, obviously, you already mentioned, obviously, what you read each day and connect with at that level. Is there anything else that you do or anyone else you seek on those off days that you have to help get you back centered?
Yeah, I think there's some really helpful practices in that. One is reframing. Like that's probably the thing that's most helpful, just reframing things of like, look, this day sucks. Okay, I'm going to recognize that this sucks right now and that I'm not enjoying this, that it's hard, that I'm frustrated, whatever, right? Fill in the blank. And then I'm going to say, okay, but in light of the bigger picture, what is the true reality of this experience? And the reality of it is this sucky part of life is actually going to make me stronger, because it's basically like the 10th rep in the gym, right? It's the one that sucks the most. It's not fun, but that's where all the real strength comes from. And if I can actively reframe my perspective to see those days that are down or that are hard, or that I don't feel like doing whatever it is I'm doing, then I can start seeing them as an opportunity instead of something that I have to deal with. And so that is probably the most helpful. But then, yeah, like I think having a close group of people that you get to pick and choose from, I've probably got 5 or 6 people that I would go to if I really need either prayer or counsel or just like someone to console with. I think people are such good resources, and relationships, we're made to be relational beings. And so I think we got to utilize relationships as much as possible. And it's actually really hard for us to do that because it's humbling, right? Our pride keeps us from saying, like, reaching out to people and saying, hey, look, I need help right now, or I need you to listen right now. And honestly, like, yesterday was a really hard day for me. I had some conversations that were super hard. And it was just like a combination of 2 different arenas in life where relationships and conversations just kind of hit the fan. And last night I was just like, I went floating. It's a great like self-care thing that I'm a huge fan of.
What is floating? Just so the listeners know.
So it's a sensory deprivation tanks. It's basically you go and float in Epsom salt water in these tanks in these enclosed rooms. And you're without gravity because you're floating in like 6 inches of water. And you do it for 60 minutes. And it's completely dark, completely no noise, and temperature controlled. So it's very comfortable. So it's as close as you can get to like feeling like you're floating. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a 60-minute forced meditation, which is, something that I can't get myself to do unless there's a structure. I can't just force myself to sit for 60 minutes. If I didn't have something like this. So it's a great space. So getting to go, after having a really hard day, just getting to go and be in the tank and kind of meditate and process. And then afterwards, I always take a journal and just sit there in the little post-float room they have, little lounge, and I just sit there with a journal and write until I'm done writing, and just really got all my thoughts out on paper. And then after that, I was able to reframe and embrace and accept and move past, I guess, the valley into the climb up the hill. So yeah. Just because you're out of the valley doesn't mean there's still not a climb ahead.
Like it. Thane, if you could, let's provide all the listeners the admin part of the show here. Share with everybody where people can find you, websites, podcasts, social media, all the places. We're going to tag it all. We're going to put it on the show notes, but it always comes better when they hear it from you.
I love it. Yeah. So thanemarcus.com is where I house pretty much everything I do, my blog, my coaching and speaking and all that. So thanemarcus.com, the upandcomershow.com is where our podcast is. And on the socials is at Thane Marcus. Instagram is probably my most used, but definitely send me a shout out on any of those platforms.
So I got 2 more questions for you, Thane, both on the fun realm here. So let's just go. Thane Marcus, your all-time favorite movie?
This is a hard one. I actually don't watch a lot of movies anymore. I love books a lot more, but I will say there's 2. But the one that people are going to know is Saving Private Ryan. That's probably one that just, I don't know, it just hit me. It was such a great depiction of war for people who aren't, enlisted, and so inspiring. And so like it's a movie that actually, like, there's parts of it I hate, which makes me love it, and so that movie. And then the one that people aren't going to know that's really my favorite movie of all time is The Art of Flight. And The Art of Flight is, I think, the best snowboarding video of all time. Snowboarding is one of my favorite things to do. And this guy, Travis Rice, made the most gorgeous cinematography with amazing soundtrack and just insane snowboarding. It was about 4 or 5 years ago, and to this day, it's still, I think, the best snowboarding video of all time.
Well, that is cool. I love when we get one that nobody has seen before. And I used to be going way back. I was a big time Warren Miller film fan with all the ski movies, but obviously this stuff is even more amazing. Very cool. Okay, so here was the question that was bugging me. It's got a 2-part thing to it. You obviously used to play on the professional tour, and you're still a fan of the game of golf. One, do you have a favorite golfer that you see that's a professional out there that you root for the most when they're competing?
It's hard. So I've got some friends, some buddies of mine that I grew up with that are on the web.com tour just below. So I'm always rooting for the guys that I know that are just good people. And there's a handful of Christians that play on tour as well. So I'm always rooting for those guys. Webb Simpson, Zach Johnson, Bubba Watson, Jonathan Bird, bunch of guys. But from a purely fan standpoint, it's kind of a toss-up. I love Rory's game. I've always loved the way he plays and the aggressiveness he has and just his ability to blow away a field, similar to Tiger. Mm-hmm. And then I actually really am a big fan of Jordan Spieth too. So those are kind of my 2 go-to guys that I'm rooting for usually. And I think they're great dudes to kind of lead the charge for this next generation.
All right, so now the last question out here, because obviously as a professional, at some point in your career, you've gotten to play on some pretty cool golf courses. Which is your all-time favorite course that you got to play on because of the avenue that you had in being a professional golfer?
Yeah, that caveat made me change my answer because the real answer would be Prairie Dunes Country Club, where I grew up. It's just a gem. But the question you asked, the answer is I think it's called the Australian Golf Club. It's in Sydney, and I got to play. Wow. Yeah, I got to play the Australian Open in 2015 there. And that was probably the highlight of my professional golf career, getting to play on a stage like that. And Jordan Spieth was the number 1 player in the world at the time. He was in the field with Adam Scott and several other guys that are just amazing, renowned golfers. So that was a real special week for me. And my parents got to come. My dad was caddying. So it was just one of those, lifetime kind of moments.
Thane Marcus Ringler, connect, collaborate, and inspire. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud today. This has been a treat.
Lou, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, brother.
You got it, man. And to all our Thrive Loud listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. You lucky person, you. As long as you're not a weirdo, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please, I'm begging you. We're really cool. Also, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Come on, I know you all have those social media platforms and you use them on the daily. If not, find us on the web at thriveloud.com. It was nice thriving with you, and see you next time.